Really, really important that you think about your website from the bottom and you design the homepage simply as the thing that links it together. Because the only role that the homepage has is for the people that already know and love you and know how to find you. Everybody else is going to find you through the information you supply. If you're selling a product actually off the website through a shopping cart, then don't make it hard for people. If they've come to the page that describes that product, it should be possible on that page to hit a button which says, I want to buy one. Don't force them to remember the product code or the description and go all the way back to the top to find the beginning of the shopping cart to re-input that product code to start the process of buying it. They've gone. I mean, life is too short. Yeah? So you need to be thinking about making the customer journey easy, intuitive, and to remove as many barriers as possible. But if you're not actually selling products, you still want them to have read the page and go, this is potentially a company that could provide me with the service that I was looking for. Who are they? Where are they? So at the very least, every single one of these pages must have navigation to the About Us page, navigation to the Contact Me page, navigation to the home page. Now you think that's self-evident, but so often I find quite interesting, useful descriptions of products or services that have been tacked on the lazy way. They're Word documents, they're pictures, today, I got an invitation to a conference that's being run by the Health and Safety Executive. I thought, on the principle of know thy enemy, I'd quite like to go along to that. So what I wanted to do was cut and paste the address and the contact details and put it into my Outlook calendar. It's a picture. They typed this thing up and scanned it. It's a black hole. I have to sit down and type all that information again. Now just think about that in terms of your relationship with your clients. It might seem the quickest and easiest way to populate your website, but just think about it in terms of their journey and their impression of your business when they land on a page like that that appears to give them the right answers but doesn't give them the means to contact you or to do something useful about it. Now, earlier on I waxed eloquent about the importance of every page having a unique page title and a unique and meaningful meta description. That was because Google uses those as the agenda for this is what this page is about. But there is another almost equally important reason why you need to do this, and that is you think about when you do a Google search and you get pages of answers. How often have you seen 2 or 3 answers that are meaningful? There's a heading, a couple of lines of description, and the technical information that you think, yeah, that looks potentially relevant to me. And then you find ones that's just gobbledygook. Yeah? And of course, you never click on those. You need to understand how and why that happens. Google needs to create a heading and 2 lines of context information based on what it found on that web page. If you provide it with a meaningful title that includes the phrase that was searched for, or part of it, and a meta description that again includes part of the phrase that the customer was looking for, Google will be very happy to use your information on the Google listing. If you don't, it'll just grab words that surround the answer, which might be completely random, it might be a price, it might be whatever. Now, there's not a lot of point in you getting one of your web pages to be a highly significant answer to a question if, when it's listed by Google, it looks like garbage and nobody will click on it. So this is your opportunity to market yourself and your product off the Google listing page. And I would argue that getting the title and the meta description to be a compelling reason why somebody looking at that listing and comparing you with the 8 or 10 others that are listed on the same screen, you want them to go, they're the people that look as though they have got the answer to my question. Click, I'll go and look at their website. Now, I have to tell you that the vast majority of website designers that I meet have no idea about this. And even if they did, they would rely on you to provide that text. And since you don't know that it matters, you wouldn't have provided that text, which is why most websites don't have this or have it done very badly. So an awful lot of websites have either the same page title on every page, or maybe page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. The very few that have taken the trouble to do it stand out and are much more likely to be the ones that get clicked on by a potential customer. So a second and very important reason why page titles and meta descriptions are critically important. And you should expect that it's part of your shared responsibility that you provide that information. You cannot expect the techies to do this, because this requires knowledge of your marketplace, of your customers, and of their needs. Yeah? Now, you'll have heard about submitting your website to the search engines. Almost certainly you'll have been approached by somebody that has said, you know, cross my palm with £500, £1,000, whatever, think of a number. I'll submit you to 500, 1,000, 5,000 search engines. The 3 major search engines do not need you to submit it. Think about, they sell access to relevant information. They want to know about your website because you contribute to their ability to provide relevant answers to their customers. There's no hiding place. They're going to find you. Might take them a little while, but they're going to find you. So it really isn't essential to do it at all. If you're going to do it, only do it once. There is no benefit in doing it repetitively, and you might even annoy them. And they all still offer free submission. They may bury it deep in their information or query pages, because of course they do all offer paid submission. And if you read the small print, the theory is that if you pay for submission, they'll index you sooner. But if you read the small print carefully enough, they don't actually make very many promises. It's just a sort of suggestion. Yeah? You must make your own judgment about this. The only exception that I would make to this about there is no point in submitting is if you have a product that people would look for through one of the specialist portals. So if, for instance, your product was a service to architects' practices, then they may well look for you, or for a business that does what you do, through one of the specialist architects' portals. And they don't have the resources to search the internet, and therefore submitting to them would make sense. But Google, MSN and Yahoo and the big search engines, they're going to find you. However, what I would say is that we'll talk more about the importance of inward links. But an inward link, quite apart from increasing the significance that Google assigns to your website, is also a good way of short-circuiting the process of being found and being indexed. And I know this for a fact because although, as I said, I'm not a techie, I did once design a website for our club. We were not getting the new members that we needed. Our traditional methods, which was leaflets in sort of sports centres or whatever, was no longer giving us the flow that we wanted. So, knowing what I know about promoting through the internet, I offered the committee that, I would have an attempt to build a website. I have to say, incidentally, that we've shut our waiting list because we're now inundated. I mean, we had a waiting list for a while, so we filled up, then we had a waiting list, then the waiting list got out of hand, and the waiting list was more than a year long, and at that point we had to even shut the waiting list. So, it can be done. But the interesting thing that I discovered, because I warned the committee that it'll take minimum 3 months to be found for the first time by Google, so don't expect instant results. However, knowing what I know, whilst I was actually designing it, I also contacted the various national bodies and said, look, we're going to have a website. Can you add it to your list of links? And they did so. And in fact, what happened was that Google re-indexed them, as it does on a regular basis, found the link to us, walked down the link, found a new website it didn't know anything about, and indexed us in 10 days. So inward links have a lot of very important roles to play, and one of them is getting indexed quicker. So well worthwhile thinking about that, not once you've got the website, but as part of the process of thinking about having one and having one designed and commissioning one. There is one directory that, if you could get onto it, would be worth doing, which is the Open Directory Project. And this address is DMOZ for Demilitarized Zone. The Open Directory Project is an attempt at a human-moderated world directory of websites. It's run by volunteers, so whereas with Google it's just a computer that's making the decision, in this case it's a human being. You submit your website, you say, I believe my website justifies being in this category within the overall structure, and a human being will check it out and go, yes, I think that's justified, or no, you're trying to pull the wool over our eyes, or whatever. And because there's a human being involved, the information is of much higher quality, and therefore it is highly respected, and the 3 big search engines use it as a source of information. So if you can get your website onto DMOZ, then it will be very valuable. That's the plus. The minus is that as the internet grows and grows exponentially, the volunteers that run it are getting very much overwhelmed. And some parts of it have pretty well stopped growing just because they can't cope. So there's a certain element of luck about this, whether the bit of the structure that your business would fit into is still being serviced by a volunteer, or whether the waiting list has just got so long that it's effectively ground to a halt. But if you can do it, there is real marketing value in that. So let's think about inward links. As I've explained, the search engines, Google, etc., have a computer program that attempts to judge what each page of your website might be a significant answer to, what question. And it's a very sophisticated piece of software, and it is evolving constantly. They are constantly attempting to improve its ability to give you relevant answers, and it's also constantly evolving in response to the guerrilla tactics of the snake oil salesman. But Google increasingly recognises that as the size of the internet gets bigger and bigger and bigger, as the sophistication of both businesses and website developers grows, as the types of information on the internet becomes more and more complex, it will be increasingly difficult for a pure computer program to make a good judgment on what you would find relevant. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're selling. They're selling the answers that you would find relevant, but they're a computer. So they are increasingly recognising that looking for mechanisms whereby the judgment of other human beings is factored in is going to be an increasingly important component of search engines competing with each other. And at its simplest, they now would say that if another website judges one of your pages to be sufficiently significant that they will link to it, that webmaster, that web developer, has given an accolade to your page. It said, I've looked at it, and it contributes a piece of information that is sufficiently useful and relevant that I want to offer that to my viewers as additional information. Now, when it became obvious that that's what Google was doing, the snake oil salesman said, oh, right, here's an opportunity. So the first thing they did was started putting links pages at the back ends of websites, where you could just pack hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of links, which you would exchange. So you'd get in touch with somebody else and go, I'll list you if you list me. Yeah? And since there was no limit to this, these links pages got very, very large indeed. At which point Google started to get wise to it and realised that no human being ever looked at those links pages. They were actually not really an accolade at all. They'd stopped being an accolade. They had simply become an item of trade. And businesses set up that would buy and sell thousands of links at a time. There were businesses doing this. So the next step in the guerrilla war was, well, okay, if I, as a website developer, develop 100 little websites all sitting on my server and all linked to each other, then Google will think that these are genuine links. Yeah? So that was step 2 in the guerrilla war. So now Google will look at the location that the link comes from. And if it's coming from the same server, it will treat it with some suspicion. So basically what Google are looking for are links that come from the words of somebody else's website and link to a paragraph or at very least a page of your website that is in context. So, if you go back to my Blue Left-Handed Widgets website, if I've made a point about the fact that mine are the best Blue Left-Handed Widgets in the world because they're made by John Smith's top quality EN37 stainless steel, then it would be logical for me to link that word, John Smith's EN37 stainless steel, to the page on John Smith's website that talks about that grade of stainless steel. Because it's useful information to my viewers that they can assess the quality of the stainless steel that I'm using to make the product, and rather than duplicating all of John Smith's information, I've given them access to their technical page. In return for which, I would expect John Smith's to have a page which says, we're so proud of our EN37 stainless steel that we're proud to be the suppliers of it to Tony Catamol Inc., manufacturers of the world's best Blue Left-Handed Widgets. And again, with a hyperlink from that phrase, Tony Catamol's Blue Left-Handed Widgets, to my website. But importantly, not to my homepage, but to the page that talks about the fact that my Blue Left-Handed Widgets are made from John Smith's best quality stainless steel. Which is why I've said it's important that you supply your own strapline, which is just the simple phrase which says, which place in your website do you want them directed? Because otherwise, by default, they'll go to your homepage. And that doesn't really act as affirmation that your product is a relevant link from John Smith's stainless steel website. Now, think about all the people that might be interested in providing reciprocal links. Customers, suppliers. But don't forget competitors. Because actually, firstly, they may not be competing on exactly the same turf. But actually, even if they are, you both win. Because both of your websites will get additional prominence thereby. So there is nothing wrong with providing a link to a competitor, so long as they link back, and you need to check so they don't diddle you, but you both benefit thereby. But yes, think about trade associations, think about business portals. If yours is a consumer service or product, in London, there are loads and loads and loads of portals about businesses in Southwark or find a florist in London or whatever. Most of them are desperate for more information. Most of them are private ventures or in some way sponsored. And they'll be delighted if you get in touch with them and say, you know, I'm a relevant entry, will you include me in your directory? And of course, all of those provide new links into your website, which Google would judge to be significant and add weight to your website. But let's also think about all of the places where people gather on the internet. Forums, blogs, social networking, Facebook, Bebo, etc. These are all places where people who share an interest or share an attitude or share some other characteristic gather together. Now, if you can imagine you're selling cake icing materials, there are definitely forums out there where cake icing enthusiasts share tips and hints and solutions. If even just once a week you go onto that forum and provide a well thought through, genuinely helpful answer to somebody's question, with a strapline which says Tony Catamol at Blue Left-Hander Widgets Inc. or whatever, you have positioned yourself in all of those viewers' eyes as being knowledgeable, helpful and approachable. More importantly, if they pass on your message to any of their friends, every copy of that message has a backward link to your website. And suddenly, your website is sitting like a spider in the middle of a web of links that are potentially spreading all over the world that are pointing back to you. Think about Facebook, think about LinkedIn, yeah, the business one. All of these are opportunities to make yourself and your website visible to groups of shared interest people. And each one of those is a link back to your website. You don't need to advertise. In fact, I would argue you shouldn't advertise. People get annoyed when they're sold at. Just be helpful. Just be informative. All it needs is the link. Because you've sold yourself by being helpful. That's all you need to do. So all of those things provide ways of increasing the prominence and the visibility of your website and therefore increasing the traffic that comes to it. But most importantly, Google counts all these things. It looks back up all of these links and adds them up and goes, not only is this a page which appears to be relevant about Blue Left-Hander Widgets, but I've found 57 other websites or other internet entities that point back to this. This has to be a high-ranking web page. I will put it on the top page. I will rank it very highly. Yeah? Now, you've got a nice website, put lots of effort into it, you've listened to what I've said, it meets all of this criteria. Google finds you, indexes you. You should understand that that first indexing, you'll be slightly on probation. Because, remember, Google wants to offer relevant answers, and there are lots of transient web pages. Think about BBC News pages. Think about sports day information from schools. You know, there are lots and lots of web pages that have a relevance that lasts minutes, hours, days at most. They don't want to offer those up next month because you are going to question whether Google is still giving you the relevant answers. So they like to see a website that's been around a little while. Now that has a consequence, because if tomorrow you decide as a result of this that you're going to go and have a company website, the first thing you should do is to buy the domain name and put up a one-page website, which is a doddle because you can do that in Word. I mean, it's childishly simple to do, which simply says, this is us. Because that starts the clock ticking. That's the date that Google says that website first came into existence. It might take you 2 or 3 months to actually replace it with a substantive website. That's fine. It also means that if you're developing a website and you've got part of it done, put it up. Because again, it serves notice on Google that this is a website that is in existence and is growing. The fact that you then add more pages over time is actually a good thing. Rather than going for, the Big Bang theory, I won't display any of this to the world until the entire thing is ready and finished and waiting to go. As long as it doesn't look tatty and doesn't look too incomplete, if you've got a section ready, put it up. Because the other side of this is, if you've got a website and Google has indexed it and has judged it to be significant for whatever questions it's decided it's significant for, it will also diarise the need to come back and recheck, because of course if you change it, it needs to change the directory entries. So it's very much like painting the Forth Bridge. And by the way, I did read somewhere that they've changed it to a polymer and they're not going to be doing it continuously, so we're going to have to find a new phrase for that, but whatever. So they will schedule a revisit. And we suspect that at first pass it's going to be about 3 months. That's roughly the default cycle for when they'll come back and recheck. Now let's think about what happens when they come back to your website and it's exactly the same. The program then starts to raise a query about, is this a transient website? Do I really want to offer it up as a relevant answer? Because it might be out of date. Indeed, there is the possibility that that company that put that website up is no longer in business, it's no longer trading. Because one of the ironies is that web space is so cheap that it is cheaper to leave dead websites up than to pay for somebody to house clean them and take them down. And I can give you a for instance, because if I search for my own name, it's not ego, I do it because it's an interesting exercise. One of the things that comes up is a diary note about a social event that I taxied the kids for when my daughter was 13. And she's now 26 and is in Australia. And that diary entry is still sitting on somebody's website. Now, I'm sure they're not interested in it, but until somebody actually housekeeps that website, it'll still be there. So this is relevant to Google. Yeah? So if a website doesn't change, the question is immediately raised, is this still live? Is this still relevant? So firstly, if you had achieved some sort of ranking with Google as being a good relevant answer, that will start to erode. Also, because it's a very big job re-indexing the entire World Wide Web, Google will change the diary entry to don't need to go back there until 4 months. And the next time round, if it hasn't changed, it might be 5 months, the next time 6 months, etc. Now, each time this happens, firstly, your significance ranking is eroding each time. Worse, when you then invest in upgrading your website, it could take 6 months before Google spots it. So it's a double whammy. So it really does matter that a website is a living, breathing entity. Now, I can see the looks on your faces. You're all going, how much have I got to change? Some pages obviously aren't going to change. The Contact Me page is probably going to stay the same forever until you move offices. The product catalogue, if you have one, may not change except that you're going to add items and subtract items. But there are some things that will change, and you can certainly have a special offers section, you can have a news section, you could have a blog of some sort that talk about new people using it, new case studies about new customers that you've worked with or whatever. And remember, I made a big thing about the importance of cross-linking from one page to another. If all your pages are just pages in sequence like a small book, then each of them has got to stand or fall on its own feet. But if you cross-link them, then a few pages that do change can lend relevance to a lot of other pages that don't change but are linked to the page that changes. So not only do inward links, cross-links within a website make it a more interesting and fun and relevant experience, not only does it give you a greater relevance ranking with Google from the off, but it gives you a mechanism for borrowing the appearance of change and evolution from a few pages and spread it right the way through your website. In terms of change, no, going through and changing full stops into commas or semicolons isn't going to work. In essence, Google will judge a page to have changed if the if the frequency table that it did originally has changed. That's its fundamental criteria. So it actually has to be about changing words, and remember, Google doesn't look at ands and these and other joining words. So it actually has to be something substantive. Or it has to be new pages. And often it's easier to add new pages about new products, new events, new case studies or whatever. And as long as you cross-link, that will benefit the rest of your website. The other thing I would say is, if you decide as a result of that, okay, fine, we're going to have a special offers page or a news page or whatever, somebody in your organisation must be responsible for keeping it up to date. Because if it's everybody's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. What do you think when you go onto a website in February and they're still talking about their Christmas special offers? How often? Worse, you go onto a prestigious architect's website and the news page talks about the fact that he's going to be the speaker at a conference in 2005. How many would you like to see? Yeah? What does it say about that organisation? So if you're going to do these things, you need to do it well. Yeah? And it means when you put up the Christmas special offers in somebody's diary on the 1st of January, it says, go to the website and change the Christmas special offers, or just take them down. Yeah? Because you can't afford, remember, you only get this one opportunity to make a good first impression. And if that's what somebody sees when they come to your website, you're already being marked down as being a bit inefficient, a bit out of date, a bit disorganised or whatever. So if you're going to do these things, do it well. So, in conclusion, all of this should give you the material to control the project, to ensure that whoever is actually going to do the work of building your website does it in a way that serves your business purposes. You wouldn't delegate the words of a brochure to a brochure designer. You'd supply the words, they do the design. Websites are the same. This is your marketing material. You need to control it. So don't delegate control to a techie. Websites are not actually primarily about technology. They are first and foremost about marketing. And you know your products, you know your customers, you know your competitors. The techies cannot know that. That it's text content and key phrases that matter. It's not about the pictures. Think about the world's most successful websites. They're all ugly. BBC, Amazon, eBay. They're ugly. They're vanilla. They work. They're intuitive. People can use them without difficulty. They do what it says on the can, but they're not pretty. So forget pretty. Be functional, be helpful, be useful, supply useful information. Do not delegate to the techies the task of writing the copy. They don't write good English. And if you can't write good English, hire a copywriter. I am constantly amazed by what a copywriter can do with what appears to be good English when they turn it into something that is readable, something that is compelling. Yeah? I love what they have to do. And since most of them are starving journalists, they're remarkably cheap and very good value. And even if you only get them to work over some of the key pages, you write the rest of it yourself, the benefits that you'll get from that will be well worthwhile. And remember, get them to write the title and meta description, because they are your primary marketing tool on Google. And finally, I hope you can see that it really, really isn't rocket science. It's just applied common sense. Thank you very much. Questions? Sir?
Can you Is it worthwhile having two identical websites? You clone of each other. You have the main one, which is your domain name, and then link to that, so that you can possibly be hit twice by Google.
No, Google will spot that, and will at best discount it, and at worst wonder why you're doing it. There's nothing wrong with having multiple domain names, and in fact, I would advocate it. I mean, at the very least, if it's Tony Catamol Inc., then I would certainly say by.co.uk, by.eu, possibly by .net. Think hard about .com. Lots of people think that .com is terribly prestigious. .com is perceived as being either international or American. Now, if you are actively intending your website to trade internationally, then .com is an important component. If you're not, it's actually a disadvantage. It is more difficult to get UK prominence for a .com domain name, because Google will judge it in the context of America and the international market. And it will actually be easier to get to the top of the Google rankings with .co.uk. But of course, if you trade internationally, then .com makes sense. So it's important to protect your interest in all these domain names. And domain names are cheap. Domain names cost, £5 a year, something like that. So there is no problem with having a decent selection of them. And of course, they can all point to your website. But the one that you publicise should be the one that is most likely to be recognised as being relevant. So if you trade within this country, I would say that the .co.uk is the most important. There are some domain names that have specific meanings. So .org or .org.uk is for not-for-profit organisations, and it would generally be perceived as being mildly disreputable if you are a trading company to be using a .org. .net, in theory, is for businesses that are part of the internet service providers, website developers and whatever. But I have to say that lots of other people who are looking for non-commercial domain names have adopted that, myself included. So my family domain is catamol.net, and that means that all the members of the family have a constant email address. So yes, have lots of them, but duplicating the website itself would actually be perceived as being an attempt at a trickery, unless they're different languages. So yeah, if you want to trade into China, you might well have a duplicate website that has Chinese as its language. That would make very good sense. And you might well interlink them so that they share a common product file and common maps and whatever, but have separate text. But otherwise, no, it would not give you any additional benefit and might be perceived as being mildly dubious. So,
just following on from that, on two of the companies that I own, I actually bought .co.uk and .com,
yeah.
But I've always actually used .com as something, on any sort of banners. I generally use .com,
I know
although
why.
they interlink.
Yeah, I know why. But if you talk to any of the technicians that do search engine optimization as a profession, they will confirm that they would struggle to get as high a ranking in Google for a .com as they would for a .co.uk, given that your product is domestic.
So should I be... I'm coming up quite good on search engines. I do come up quite well on search engines, but should I be changing, as you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, about making sure that your www is everywhere?
Yeah.
Should I be now getting everything reprinted to .co.uk?
I would, yes, I would.
Right.
I wouldn't spend a fortune. I would wait until they need reprinting. It's not a big deal, but it will, over time, and as the World Wide Web grows, it will increasingly become important, and therefore, over a period of time, I would try and migrate to the .co.uk. But hang on to the .coms, because the last thing you want is to not renew them and have some competitor buy them and start stealing part of your web traffic. So, which is why it's important that you control and you buy and control all of the suffixes that you think might be relevant. I have actually seen a small business, quite badly harmed because a competitor bought up the domain, the suffixes that they hadn't thought to buy, and pointed them at their own website. And whilst it's technically illegal because it's actually called trading off, is it? If I remember rightly, something like that. You'd struggle to find anybody that would actually take it on, and if they didn't have a lot of money, even if you did sue them, what would you get out of it? So much better, given how cheap domain names are, to just buy them all and point them all at your website, and then anybody that guesses, because what happens is people remember the important bit and guess the suffix. Yeah. And therefore, if they guess .co.uk, you want them to come to your website, even if you've actually had .com as your primary identity. Either will take you to the website. Yeah. So.
It's London Walks. We've got www.walks.com, londonwalks.com, and walks.co.uk. The latter we don't use at all, really. It's somewhere way down there. The londonwalks.com is just a sort of single page, and we're gradually, pulling that up. It's about 35 now. Walks.com for London Walks has been number one on Google for a very, very long time. Now, I was very interested in what you were saying about, because it's a sort of big website with lots of pages, and I thought that was very interesting what you were saying about different titles and meta tags and all that. But the question that was running through my mind when you were saying that was, well, were we to do that with some of these pages, would that in fact jeopardize that number one ranking? Because I was always under the impression that Google's just looking and it's just London Walks, London Walks, London Walks all over that big website.
I mean, firstly, the very process of changing it and adding different copy would actually reinforce your position. If you're already number one, you're number one for that particular phrase, but I do think you need to be thinking more laterally about what other questions might potential customers key in for which that phrase is not included, and therefore they may go to a competitor. So I would say protect your position by updating the text, because that gives Google the warm feeling that this is a live, maintained website. But now start thinking about adding additional pages and additional information optimized for other phrases that the potential customer might use.
I read a thing recently about sub-URLs where you could, say, the example you had, you could actually have blue widgets and then the website as a way of trying to draw traffic via search engine. Is that something you recommend or not?
Brennan talked to a very experienced website development company about that recently. Their view is that at the moment it works very nicely because Google hasn't spotted it, because not too many people are doing it. Their fear, their suspicion, which is why one of the things they said to me is don't talk about it. Because their fear is that if it starts to become frequently, if you do that, Google will actually believe that these are different websites, although they're actually just sections or even just individual pages within your website. So it has the potential to dramatically increase your relevance ranking, because of course all of these interlinks between the pages are perceived as being interlinks between different websites. So it can work spectacularly well today.
Right.
But they are very nervous that Google update their algorithm at regular intervals, by small increments every month and by big increments every 3 to 6 months. And they do have this nervousness that if they commit some of their customers to that as their strategy, then they could find themselves needing to do repair work very fast indeed if Google decides this is actually not a trick, but it's not structurally the way they want people to design websites, and downgrade it. But yeah, today it is extremely successful. Ma'am.
Right, I've got a slight dilemma with my website. You were talking about keywords and thinking what the customer will key in. Well, I sell fair trade crafts from Latin America, and at the moment I source the goods from Central America. But whenever people come across my goods, they say, "Oh, look, crafts from South America." So I know that they would key into Google crafts from South America, but that's not what I actually sell. So could I put it in the meta tag South America, but then Central or Latin America in the main thing?
Well, okay. I'm sure I shouldn't say this, but I think my solution to that would be to have a page that talks about your ethical principles and talk about exactly that. Say, look, the reality is that we source all of our products from Central America, but lots of people seem to think that it comes from South America. So you have a perfectly justifiable reason for using that phrase on your webpage, but are not making any immoral claims.
But it will only take people to that page, presumably, rather than
Yeah,
to
yeah.
So
But even that is a benefit, isn't it? Because at the moment, no part of your website addresses that potential inquiry. Yeah. But the good news is you're still getting these customers. What you can't know is how many you're not getting because they looked for South America, your website didn't respond, they went elsewhere.
the customers I'm getting are actually physically not through the website. This is just when I've had
Right,
things like
okay.
that. So I don't know.
I can't see that there's anything morally wrong with having a page which talks about both geographical references, if only to explain what you actually are and what you're not. But of course the end result would be that page is going to get found for the wrong reference, and of course you would nicely link it back to where your products are to be found.
But I can the meta tag or whatever meta description say colourful crafts from Latin America in brackets Central and South America, so that I've got South America there.
Well, first thing is don't use brackets,
Right. Okay.
and don't use commas.
Okay.
It's a small technical detail, but if you're going to do strings of phrases in the keywords, spacing them out but not putting any commas is much, much more powerful. Because each time you put a comma in, you say to Google, only treat the words between those two commas together. If you have all of them with no commas, it will potentially mix and match any of those words and phrases to create the phrase that you're looking for. So commas and brackets are a bad thing. Yes, but remember what I said. Keywords are not ranked terribly highly by Google. So better than nothing, but a real page that talked about this and talked about where you source your stuff from and talking about the fact that it actually doesn't come from, I think is honest, because I mean, if this is the sort of product you're selling, I'm quite sure your website tries to convey a very ethical, a very moral approach, and therefore doing something that is just even slightly dubious is not consistent with the image you're trying to convey. Whereas what I've just suggested, although it still has the same effect, appears to be very ethical, because you're actually denying the rumour that your goods come from, but of course it will still attract that attention. Any more questions?
Very similar situation to the lady over here. I sell meze. Now I've got a similar problem but slightly different, because meze is spelt several different ways. If I search my own website and I put meze London Bridge, I come up on the first page, first link, second link. If I then change the spelling, I might be second or third. It's just that I chose to spell meze in a certain way, but there is M-E-H-E-Z, M-E-double-Z-E, and as I spell it, M-E-Z-E. They're all, because it's obviously I forget the word, it's
they're interchangeable.
Well, it's a dialect. It's like how hummus is spelt or tabbouleh or any of these things, because they're obviously translations, and it's done on.
Well, at the very least, I think you justify having a page which talks about that. Talks about the fact that you may think of this as being meze spelt this way, but of course the original comes from the Greek or the Turkish or whatever, which is this. Other places may spell it this way or that way and whatever, But I think you would actually serve yourself better by trying to interchange them all the way through the site, so that on any one page you have all three possible spellings, if there are three.
What about hiding it?
Hiding it? Well,
so use one, but use the other two somewhere that the viewer wouldn't see. Is there a way of doing that?
There is, but Google's well aware of it. For those of us that are a bit long in the tooth, you may remember perhaps 10 years ago web pages, often on coloured backgrounds, where when you got to the end of the text, the page appeared to go on forever. Yeah? And you think, why have they done that? You know, they've run it. That's a similar trick. What actually was happening was all of the rest of that page, if it was a green background, was green text on a green background. So the viewer couldn't read it, but because, as I showed you, the internet, Google reads the program, not the visible image, Google will read it. And often that green bit would be all about pornography or whatever because it attracts attention. I promise you Google is well able now to spot invisible text. So I wouldn't do that because at best it'll just ignore it because it knows what you're trying to do. And at worst, might even think that you're trying to pull the wool over its eyes. No, I would be upfront about it and say, look, you know, firstly I'll have a page that talks about the different spellings and explains it. And maybe even wherever, remember I've talked about cross-linking. There's no reason, it might be a little bit tedious, but there's no reason why wherever you use that word, in whichever of its spellings, that is a hyperlink to the page that talks about the different spellings and why they're different. Now suddenly the whole website, A, is being linked together much more effectively, and B, you're then borrowing the different spellings and giving them all weight in all of the different pages. The client I was talking to last week had a very similar problem. Her website sells English language courses to overseas students, or access to information. And we had a very long debate about the fact that depending on which country the student is coming from, we may be standing today in Great Britain, in England, in the UK, United Kingdom, different countries. You know, Americans call this place England. Yeah? The old Commonwealth called this place Great Britain. Other countries call it United Kingdom or UK. And therefore she had exactly the same problem, which is when she's writing pages describing these services, which does she use? And the solution had to be mix and match. Yeah? It's tedious, but basically each page needed to have one example of all of them. Plus a page which talked about the fact that, you know, the people do treat them differently and that actually they're all the same thing. Yeah? Next.
This was based on a HTML website.
Yeah.
So if you want to use Flash, not good. I see Flash being used a lot.
Right, let me explain. If you treat Flash the way you would treat a picture, like a JPEG, Flash has a role to play if you need to demonstrate a moving image. You need to demonstrate a product or something like that. But Flash is invisible to Google. It is dreadfully slow to download. But the real killer is most people that work for big companies cannot access Flash because it's a security hazard. Because when Flash is running on your browser, it looks just like a virus. It behaves like a virus. So I can't, when I go to a client who's got a Flash website, I arrive and I say, I have no idea what your website says or looks like because my company will not allow me to
Stay and have a drink with us. I think we're directly below the bar on the ground floor. We've got some free drinks there, free snacks there. So love to see you down there.